What if I told you that some of the most powerful spiritual awakenings do not happen in temples, meditation halls, or moments of solitude, but in the bedroom? Not in the way society talks about it, not in the way movies portray it, and definitely not in the way the ego understands intimacy. I'm talking about a moment so quiet, so subtle, and yet so disruptive, that it cracks the identity of the divine masculine wide open. Because for many men on the twin flame path, awakening doesn't begin with enlightenment. It begins with confusion, a moment where time seems to slow down, where the body is present but the mind goes somewhere else entirely, where intimacy feels less like desire and more like recognition. Have you ever been there? A moment where you're close to someone, and suddenly it doesn't feel physical anymore. You're not thinking. You're not performing. You're not trying to be anything. You're just there, and something inside you shifts. You don't know why. You don't have language for it. But you walk away from that moment feeling like something irreversible has happened. This is where the divine masculine awakening often begins. Not with fireworks, not with certainty, but with a strange, unsettling feeling that your old self no longer fits. And here's the part no one talks about. For many divine masculines, the bedroom becomes a spiritual portal, not because of sex, but because of presence. Because for the first time in their lives, they are not in control. They are not chasing. They are not proving. They are not hiding behind strength, logic, or achievement. They are felt, seen beyond their role, seen beyond their armor, seen beyond their body. And that is terrifying, because the divine masculine has been conditioned to survive through control. Control of emotions, control of vulnerability, control of desire, control of outcome. But the twin flame connection doesn't ask for control. It asks for surrender. And surrender doesn't happen in the mind. It happens in moments when defenses fall, when walls soften, when the body relaxes enough for the soul to speak. That's why so many divine masculines experience their first awakening not during meditation, but after a moment of deep intimacy, a moment where they didn't try to impress, didn't try to dominate, didn't try to escape, a moment where they simply felt. And afterward something feels off. They can't explain it to their friends. They can't rationalize it to themselves. They might even try to dismiss it. It was just chemistry. It was just attraction. It was just a moment. But deep down, they know that's not true. Because moments like this don't leave you questioning your entire life. Moments like this don't trigger emotional withdrawal. They don't awaken old memories. They don't surface childhood wounds you thought were buried. And yet this one does. This is where the divine masculine starts to feel the split. On one side, the life they've built, the identity they've worn, the version of themselves that feels safe, familiar, and socially accepted. On the other side, a quiet knowing, pull they didn't ask for, a presence that feels more real than anything they've known. And the bedroom becomes the doorway between these two worlds. Not because of what happens there physically, but because of what happens internally after. The silence, the emotional waves, the urge to withdraw and be alone, the sudden need for distance without understanding why. This is often misunderstood as rejection, but it isn't. It's initiation. An initiation the divine masculine never prepared for. Because no one taught him that intimacy could awaken the soul. No one taught him that being held, emotionally or energetically, could dismantle everything he thought he was. So instead of leaning in, he pulls away. Instead of opening up, he retreats into logic. Instead of saying, "Something is happening to me," he says nothing at all. And this silence becomes the first sign of awakening. Because awakening doesn't always look like light. Sometimes it looks like fear. Sometimes it looks like confusion. Sometimes it looks like running. And if you're watching this, whether you identify as the divine masculine, or you're connected to one, ask yourself this. Have you ever felt closer to someone than you were ready for? Have you ever felt seen in a way that made you want to disappear? Have you ever left an intimate moment feeling more awake and more lost at the same time? Yes, you're not broken. You're not weak. You're standing at the threshold of something ancient. Because the twin flame journey doesn't awaken the divine masculine through force. It awakens him through truth. And truth, when it first arrives, doesn't feel safe. It feels disruptive. And this is only the beginning. Because what happens next? The strange emotional reactions, the urge to pull away, the way intimacy starts triggering memories, dreams, and spiritual awareness. These are not accidents. They are signs. And in the next part, we're going to explore why the divine masculine often enters a crisis right after these moments, and why that crisis is actually the gateway to his awakening. If this resonates with you, stay with me, because what you're experiencing is not random. It's sacred. The moment after intimacy is often where the real story begins. Not the touch, not the closeness, but what happens after the door closes, after the silence returns, after the divine masculine is left alone with himself. This is where confusion enters. Because instead of feeling satisfied, grounded, or fulfilled, he feels unsettled. Something feels different. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. And the divine masculine does not trust unfamiliar territory. He has been taught his entire life to move forward with certainty, to define himself by clarity, to be decisive, composed, and emotionally controlled. So when the twin flame connection disrupts that inner order, his first response is not curiosity, it is resistance. This resistance is what many people mistake for emotional immaturity, avoidance, or lack of readiness. But beneath the surface, something much deeper is happening. A crisis of identity. Because the divine masculine is not just reacting to the other person. He is reacting to the version of himself that is being challenged. Before awakening, his sense of self is often built on structure. Asterisk who he is supposed to be, asterisk what he is supposed to want, asterisk how he is supposed to love, asterisk how much vulnerability is acceptable. This structure feels stable, predictable, safe. But the twin flame connection doesn't fit into this structure. It bypasses logic. It bypasses strategy. It bypasses effort. And that's what makes it dangerous to the ego. Because for the first time, the divine masculine realizes that something outside his control has power over him. Not power in a manipulative sense. Power in a revealing sense. It exposes his emotional blind spots. It stirs feelings he never learned to name. It brings to the surface questions he's avoided for years. Questions like, asterisk who am I without my roles? Asterisk what do I feel when I'm not performing? Asterisk what happens if I stop being the one who holds everything together? These questions don't arrive gently. They arrive all at once. And the nervous system isn't prepared. So instead of leaning into the discomfort, the divine masculine often goes into shutdown mode. He becomes quiet, distant, analytical. Not because he doesn't care, but because he cares too much. Caring at this depth threatens the foundations he's built his life upon. This is the awakening crisis. A moment where the old identity starts to crack. But the new one hasn't formed yet. It's a liminal space. And humans hate liminal spaces. Especially those conditioned to equate strength with certainty. During this phase, the divine masculine may try to asterisk rationalize the connection, asterisk minimize its significance, asterisk convince himself it was just intense chemistry, asterisk distract himself with work, routines, or other relationships. But the body remembers. The nervous system remembers. The soul remembers. And no amount of logic can erase that. This is why awakening doesn't look like enlightenment at first. It looks like emotional turbulence, mood swings, restlessness, an urge to withdraw, a sudden need for solitude. He may feel pulled between two realities, one where everything makes sense, and another where everything feels true. And truth is far more destabilizing than logic. Because truth doesn't ask permission. It doesn't negotiate. Simply is. The divine masculine begins to notice subtle changes. Moments where he feels more sensitive than usual. Times when music hits deeper. Silence feels louder. Memories from childhood surface unexpectedly. He might feel emotions without knowing why. A heaviness in the chest. A tightness in the throat. A longing he can't place. This isn't weakness. This is the nervous system recalibrating. The twin flame connection activates layers of consciousness that have been dormant for years, sometimes lifetimes. An awakening is not a clean, linear process. It's messy, disorienting, often lonely, because the divine masculine rarely has language for what he's experiencing. And even if he did, he wouldn't know who to tell. So he internalizes it. He carries it quietly. He tries to figure it out alone. This is why many divine masculines enter a phase of isolation during awakening. Not because they don't want connection, but because they don't know how to be connected without losing themselves. And here's the paradox. The more he resists the transformation, the stronger the internal pressure becomes. Because awakening is not something that can be forced or stopped. Once the door opens, it doesn't fully close. And slowly, often against his will, something begins to shift. He starts questioning his old definitions of success. He notices dissatisfaction in places that once felt fulfilling. He becomes aware of emotional numbness he didn't realize was there. This is the beginning of awareness. Not spiritual awareness, self-awareness. And that is far more confronting, because awareness strips away denial. It brings honesty, and honesty demands change. This is the moment where the divine masculine stands at a crossroads. He can retreat fully into the old identity, numbing himself, suppressing the call, reinforcing the walls. Or he can begin the slow, terrifying process of letting go. Letting go of certainty, letting go of control, letting go of who he thought he had to be. This is not a dramatic choice. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens in quiet moments, in late-night thoughts, in sudden emotional reactions, in the realization that he can no longer go back to being asleep. This is the awakening shift. Not when everything feels clear, but when pretending stops working, and the divine masculine begins to sense that the discomfort he's feeling is not punishment. It's initiation. An initiation into deeper presence, into emotional truth, into a version of himself that is more whole but less defended. And in the next part, we'll explore one of the first unmistakable signs that this shift has begun, why intimacy with a twin flame makes time itself feel different, and how that altered perception is a signal of energetic alignment rather than physical attachment. Because once the awakening starts, reality never feels quite the same again. There is a moment, so subtle it almost goes unnoticed, when time begins to behave differently, not in a dramatic cinematic way, not with visions or bright flashes of light, but quietly, gently, almost respectfully. For the divine masculine, this moment often happens in intimacy with the twin flame, a moment when the clock is still ticking, but internally everything slows down, breathing changes, thoughts soften, the urgency to do, perform, or impress dissolves, and suddenly, he's not aware of time passing. Minutes feel like seconds, or seconds stretch into something immeasurable. And afterward, when the mind comes back online, there's confusion. How long were we there? Did that really just happen? Why does this feel different from anything else I've known? This experience is often brushed aside, rationalized, explained away as chemistry or emotional intensity. But here's what the divine masculine doesn't realize yet. Time distortion during intimacy is not a psychological illusion. It's an energetic signal. Because time as we experience it is deeply connected to identity. The sense of past and future exists because the mind is constantly referencing. Asterisk who I was, asterisk who I am, asterisk who I need to become. But when the divine masculine enters deep energetic alignment with his twin flame, that narrative collapses. There is no past to defend, no future to control, no role to maintain, only presence. And presence has no time. This is why these moments feel timeless, not because they are exciting, but because they are real. The divine masculine is no longer split between thinking and feeling. He is fully here, fully embodied, fully aware without effort. And this is profoundly unfamiliar, because most of his life has been lived in forward motion. Planning, building, achieving, protecting. Even in intimacy, he's often somewhere else. Asterisk anticipating the next move, asterisk measuring performance, asterisk staying mentally alert. But with the twin flame, that vigilance drops. And when it drops, something ancient awakens. A memory not stored in the brain but in the nervous system. A remembrance of what it feels like to be safe without control. This is why time feels irrelevant. Because safety allows presence, and presence dissolves time. For many divine masculines, this is the first time they've ever experienced intimacy without internal tension. No pressure, No agenda. No need to prove worth. Just being. And afterward, the contrast is jarring. Returning to the world of schedules, expectations, and structure feels heavy, artificial, almost wrong. He may find himself replaying the moment, not out of desire but confusion. Why did that feel different? Why did I lose track of time? Why did it feel like something deeper than attraction? Because attraction excites the nervous system, but alignment regulates it. And regulation feels like stillness. This is where many divine masculines begin to feel unsettled, because the mind wants explanation, but the experience doesn't offer one, simply exists. This is often when fear quietly enters, not fear of the other person, fear of losing control, because if time can disappear, what else can? Presence feels this powerful. What happens to the identity built on distance and defense? This is why some divine masculines unconsciously create space after these moments. They feel the depth but don't know how to integrate it. They return to movement, to distraction, to busyness, not because they want to forget, but because staying present feels like standing at the edge of something vast. And vastness is intimidating, especially for someone who has survived by staying grounded in logic. But here's the deeper truth. When time stops during twin flame intimacy, it's not an escape from reality. It's an entrance into it, because reality is not linear. Linear time is a function of the mind. Presence is a function of the soul. And the soul doesn't operate on clocks. This is why these moments feel sacred. Even when nothing special is happening. No dramatic declarations. No intense physical expression. Sometimes it's just lying together in silence, breathing in sync, existing without words. And yet, feels more intimate than anything before. Because intimacy at the soul level is not about closeness. It's about coherence. Two nervous systems settling into the same rhythm. Two energies recognizing each other. Two beings existing without masks. This is the divine masculine's first real taste of union consciousness. Not union with the other person, but union within himself. The split between mind and body closes. The tension between strength and softness dissolves. He doesn't have to choose. He can be both. And once this experience happens, it cannot be forgotten. Even if he tries, even if he runs, even if he denies its significance. Because something inside him now knows what presence feels like. And everything else feels incomplete. This is why awakening often accelerates after these moments. Because once the nervous system has tasted coherence, it begins to reject fragmentation. Old patterns feel heavier. Distractions feel emptier. Surface-level connections feel hollow. And the divine masculine may not understand why. He just knows something has changed. This is not obsession. It's calibration. A recalibration of the internal compass. And while he may not yet have the courage to follow it, he can no longer ignore it. In the next part, we'll explore what happens after these timeless moments. Why emotional waves, confusion, and even fear often surge in their aftermath, and why those emotional reactions are not a sign of failure, but proof that deep inner healing has begun. Because when time stops, something old begins to dissolve, and not everyone is ready for that. But once it starts, there is no going back. The most confusing part doesn't happen during intimacy. It happens after the closeness, after the stillness, after the moment where time seemed to disappear. That's when the emotional waves begin. And for the divine masculine, these waves often feel overwhelming, unexpected, and deeply unsettling. Instead of feeling calm, bonded, or secure, he may feel anxious, restless, heavy, even afraid. Sometimes sadness appears without a clear reason. Sometimes irritation. Sometimes an urge to pull away from everything. And the first thought that crosses his mind is often, "What's wrong with me?" Because this reaction doesn't match the narrative he's been taught. Intimacy is supposed to feel satisfying. Closeness is supposed to create reassurance. Connection is supposed to bring peace. So why does it feel like something inside him is unraveling? The answer is simple but not easy. Because intimacy with a twin flame doesn't just open the heart. It opens the emotional storage rooms that have been locked for years, sometimes for lifetimes. The divine masculine has survived by compartmentalizing his emotions. Pain here, fear there, longing buried deep underneath responsibility, logic, and strength. And for most of his life, that strategy worked. Until now, because the twin flame connection doesn't respect compartments. It bypasses the mind and speaks directly to the nervous system. And the nervous system remembers everything. Every moment he felt unseen as a child. Every time he learned it was safer to stay quiet. Every experience where vulnerability led to disappointment or rejection. These memories aren't stored as stories. They're stored as sensations. Tightness in the chest, pressure behind the eyes, a lump in the throat, an ache he can't name. During intimacy, when presence is deep and defenses are lowered, these stored emotions finally have space to surface. Not because something is wrong, but because something finally feels safe enough to be felt. This is why the emotional wave comes afterward. Because during the moment itself, the nervous system is regulated. But once separation returns, once the stillness ends, the system begins processing what was unlocked. And processing doesn't feel gentle. Feels like emotional overflow. The divine masculine may suddenly feel emotions that don't seem connected to the present moment. He might feel grief without loss, fear without threat, longing without language. This is shadow material rising. Not shadows as darkness, but shadows as unfelt truth. Parts of him that adapted to survive. Parts that learned to suppress need, softness, and emotional dependence. And now those parts are being called into awareness. This is deeply confronting, because awareness removes numbness. And numbness has been his shield. So the mind scrambles to regain control. It asks, *, why am I feeling this way? *, is this too much? *, am I losing myself? *, should I step back before I get hurt? And often the conclusion is distance. Not because the divine masculine wants to disconnect, but because he doesn't yet know how to stay present with emotion. He was never taught that emotions can move through without destroying him. He was taught to manage, suppress, or solve them. But emotional awakening doesn't want to be solved. It wants to be witnessed. This is where the inner child becomes activated. The part of him that learned early on. * don't need too much. * don't feel too deeply. * don't rely on anyone. * stay strong. Stay contained. When intimacy cracks that containment, the inner child panics. And panic doesn't look like tears for everyone. Sometimes it looks like withdrawal, silence, avoidance, sudden emotional distance. From the outside, this can look confusing or even hurtful. But internally, the divine masculine is overwhelmed by sensations he doesn't yet understand. He's not running from love. He's running from emotional exposure. Because exposure means vulnerability. And vulnerability feels like danger to a nervous system conditioned by survival. Here's what's important to understand. These emotional waves are not a sign that the connection is wrong. They are a sign that it's real. Surface-level connections don't activate buried emotional layers. They stay in the safe zone of familiarity. But twin flame intimacy goes straight to the core. It activates healing whether the mind agrees or not. This is why the divine masculine may oscillate between longing and fear. One moment he feels deeply connected. The next he feels the urge to retreat. This push-pull dynamic is not manipulation. It's integration in progress. He's learning how to hold presence and emotion at the same time. And that learning curve is steep. Because feeling deeply requires something he hasn't practiced. Self-compassion. Instead of judging his emotional reactions, instead of trying to shut them down, the awakening divine masculine is being invited to do something radical, to stay, to breathe, to let emotions rise without labeling them as weakness. This is often when dreams intensify, when memories surface unexpectedly, when old relationships suddenly make sense. The psyche is reorganizing, the heart is recalibrating. And this process doesn't follow a schedule. It moves in waves. Some days feel clear and grounded, others feel heavy and confusing. But each wave releases something old. Each emotional surge clears space for deeper presence. This is why the divine masculine's awakening is rarely graceful. It's raw, unpolished, human. And that is exactly what makes it sacred. Because awakening is not about becoming something new. It's about allowing what was always there to finally be felt. In the next part, We'll explore one of the most mysterious aspects of this process: why physical closeness with a twin flame can awaken memories that don't belong to this lifetime, and how the body remembers truths the mind has never learned. Because these emotional waves are only the beginning, something much deeper is starting to surface. There is a moment when the divine masculine realizes something unsettling. What he is feeling does not belong to logic, does not belong to memory as he knows it, does not belong to this lifetime alone. It begins quietly. A touch that lingers longer than expected, a closeness that feels strangely familiar, a sensation in the body that has no clear origin. And suddenly, there is recognition. Not recognition of the other person's face, voice, or personality, but recognition of being. A sense of, I know this. I've known this before. I don't understand how, but this feels ancient. This is where the divine masculine often becomes deeply unsettled, because memory, as he understands it, requires experience. And yet, this feeling arrives without reference. It's not nostalgia. It's not imagination. It's not fantasy. It's remembering without a story. And the body is the first to know, because the body does not lie. It stores experiences beyond words, beyond linear time, beyond conscious recall. When the divine masculine enters physical closeness with a twin flame, the body recognizes energetic patterns that predate the mind. Patterns of safety, patterns of resonance, patterns of coherence. This is why the sensation feels so different from desire. Desire is directional. It wants something. Recognition is still. Simply is. And stillness is often terrifying for someone who has survived through movement. The divine masculine may feel waves of emotion rise without warning, not tied to the present moment, not linked to the other person's actions, but emerging from somewhere deeper. A sudden ache in the heart, a sense of longing that feels both sweet and painful, a quiet grief that doesn't have a clear source. This is soul memory awakening, not as images, not as past life scenes, but as felt knowing. The body remembers connection beyond separation, beyond gender, beyond role, beyond time. And when that memory awakens, it destabilizes the ego, because the ego relies on continuity, on narrative, on cause and effect. But soul memory doesn't explain itself, it simply surfaces. This is often when the divine masculine begins questioning his own sanity. Why does this feel deeper than anything I've experienced? Why does closeness feel like home and danger at the same time? Why does this awaken emotions I've never accessed before? Because what's awakening is not attraction. It's recognition across dimensions of self. The twin flame connection activates the subconscious mind at a level most relationships never reach. It bypasses conditioning, bypasses expectation, bypasses cultural scripts about love and intimacy, and touches the blueprint beneath it all. The blueprint that existed before defense mechanisms formed, before survival strategies hardened, before the divine masculine learned to protect himself by staying distant. This is why physical closeness can feel overwhelming, because the body suddenly remembers what wholeness feels like. And wholeness threatens fragmentation. The ego has worked very hard to keep things compartmentalized. Strength here, emotion there, need buried underneath responsibility. But soul memory doesn't respect compartments, it dissolves them, and dissolution feels like loss before it feels like freedom. The divine masculine may feel moments of dissociation, moments where he feels outside of time, moments where his sense of self blurs. This isn't dysfunction, it's identity loosening. The rigid boundaries that define me and not me begin to soften. And in that softening, old truths surface. Truths like, asterisk, I have been living guarded. Asterisk, I have been surviving instead of feeling. Asterisk, I have been strong but not whole. This realization doesn't come as a clear thought, comes as a feeling, a pressure behind the eyes, a heaviness in the chest, a quiet surrender that feels both relieving and terrifying. Because if this closeness awakens something eternal, what does that mean for the life he's built? What does that mean for the version of himself he's been maintaining? This is why many divine masculines feel the urge to pull away right after moments of deep physical connection. Not because they regret it, but because it opens something they don't yet know how to hold. Soul memory is not romantic. It is disruptive. It doesn't say, "This feels nice." It says, "This is true." And truth requires reorganization. Reorganization of identity, of priorities, of values. The divine masculine may start questioning choices that once felt solid. Careers that once felt purposeful may feel hollow. Relationships that once felt stable may feel distant. Distractions that once numbed may lose their effect. Because once the body remembers wholeness, it cannot unremember it, even if the mind tries, even if fear intervenes, even if distance is created. The memory remains. This is why twin flame intimacy is often followed by a period of silence. The divine masculine needs space, not to forget, but to integrate. Integration takes time, because the nervous system must learn how to hold depth without collapsing into fear. The body must learn that openness does not equal annihilation, that vulnerability does not equal loss of control, that presence does not equal danger. This learning cannot be rushed. It happens in layers, in waves, in moments of reflection, confusion, and gradual acceptance. And here's the most important truth. Soul memory is not about reunion. It's about remembrance of self. The twin flame doesn't awaken memory, so the divine masculine can cling to the other person. It awakens memory so he can reclaim parts of himself that were lost to survival. Parts that knew softness. Parts that trusted connection. Parts that felt without armor. This is why the experience feels so personal and so destabilizing. Because it's not about us. It's about me. Who I really am beneath conditioning. Who I am without defenses. Who I am when I stop running from depth. And this realization marks a turning point. Because once soul memory awakens, the divine masculine cannot return to unconscious living. He may resist. He may delay. He may deny. But something inside him has already shifted. In the next part, we'll explore why this awakening often triggers the strongest urge of all, the urge to pull away, and why that withdrawal is not rejection, but fear standing at the edge of transformation. Because remembering who you truly are is not gentle. It is revolutionary. This is the moment that hurts the most. Not because love disappears, but because it suddenly becomes silent. After the closeness, after the depth, after the recognition that felt undeniable, the divine masculine pulls away. The message is slow. The energy shifts. The presence fades. And for the one on the other side, the question is immediate and painful. If this connection was real, why did he leave? But what looks like rejection on the surface is often something else entirely. It is fear, standing at the edge of transformation. Because awakening is not just emotional, it is existential. And the divine masculine has just touched something that threatens his entire sense of self. He is not running from the other person. He is running from the death of an identity built carefully over years. An identity shaped by expectation, responsibility, survival, and control. The twin flame connection doesn't challenge that identity gradually. Challenges it all at once. Through presence. Through recognition. Through the body remembering what wholeness feels like. And when the body remembers, the mind panics. Because the mind exists to preserve continuity. To keep things familiar. To avoid disruption. So when something arrives that cannot be explained, controlled, or compartmentalized, the nervous system goes into defense, fight, freeze, or run. The divine masculine often chooses running, not because he is weak, but because withdrawal is the only defense he was ever taught. From a young age, many divine masculines learned that emotional closeness comes with risk. Risk of disappointment, risk of dependency, risk of being seen when they weren't ready. So they learned to survive by staying just out of reach. Strong, capable, self-sufficient. But twin flame intimacy removes that distance. It sees through armor. And armor removal feels like danger to a nervous system conditioned by survival. So when he pulls away, it is not a decision. It is a reflex. A reflex triggered by emotional exposure that feels overwhelming. He may not even understand why he's doing it. He just knows he needs space. To think. To breathe. To regain a sense of control. Because control feels like safety. This is why explanations are often absent. Why communication becomes minimal. Why silence replaces clarity. Not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't yet have the emotional language to explain what is happening inside him. He is not choosing distance over connection. He is choosing self-preservation. This is the paradox of the divine masculine awakening. The closer he gets to truth, the more his fear surfaces, because truth demands change, and change threatens everything familiar. This is often where the inner child takes over. The part of him that learned early. Don't need too much. Don't trust fully. Don't let anyone see you unsure. That inner child believes that closeness leads to loss. So when intimacy deepens beyond comfort, the child pulls the emergency brake. Withdrawal. Silence. Distance. From the outside, this looks like abandonment. From the inside, it feels like survival. And here's the painful truth. The divine masculine often hates himself for this. He feels guilty, ashamed, confused, because part of him wants connection, and another part is terrified of what connection awakens. This internal conflict creates paralysis. So instead of explaining, he disappears. Not to punish, but because staying feels impossible. This is why chasing doesn't work. Why demanding clarity doesn't help. Because the part of him that pulled away is not accessible through logic. It's a nervous system response. And nervous systems don't respond to pressure. They respond to safety. Safety to feel without being overwhelmed. Safety to exist without expectation. Safety to integrate awakening at his own pace. This is where many misunderstand the twin flame journey. They think withdrawal means the connection wasn't real. But the opposite is often true. If the connection were shallow, there would be no need to run. Surface-level relationships don't threaten identity. They don't awaken buried memory. They don't dismantle ego structures. The divine masculine runs because the connection is too real. Because it touches something he cannot unsee. Because it awakens parts of him he was never taught how to hold. And yet, this withdrawal is not permanent. It is a pause. Pause for integration. A pause for nervous system regulation. A pause for the psyche to reorganize. But integration requires one thing above all else. Non-judgment. From himself. And from the other. Because shame deepens fear. And fear reinforces withdrawal. The awakening divine masculine does not need to be chased into love. He needs to be met without demand. This doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment. It means understanding that silence is not absence. Distance is not disinterest. And running is not rejection. It is fear standing at the edge of rebirth. The divine masculine will return, not because he is pulled back, but because fear eventually exhausts itself. Because suppression cannot hold truth forever. Because what has been awakened cannot be put back to sleep. And when he returns, it is often quieter, less dramatic, more grounded, because something inside him has shifted. Not fully, not yet, but enough to take one step closer instead of away. In the next part, we'll explore how the bedroom, once a place of desire, transforms into something else entirely. A space of healing, a space of safety, a space where the divine masculine learns that intimacy does not have to cost him his identity, but can actually restore it. Because awakening does not end with running. It begins when running no longer works. There comes a moment when something quietly changes. Not in words, not in decisions, but in energy. The bedroom, once a place of desire, tension, performance, or escape, begins to feel different, softer, quieter, safer. For the divine masculine, this shift is subtle but profound. Because for most of his life, intimacy has been tied to action, to doing, to proving, to satisfying expectations, his own and others. Even tenderness carried pressure. Even closeness required effort. But after the awakening begins, after the running slows, after the emotional waves settle just enough to be tolerated, the bedroom transforms, stops being a stage, and becomes a sanctuary. Not because passion disappears, but because something deeper arrives. Presence without urgency, touch without agenda, closeness without fear of losing control. This is the moment the divine masculine begins to realize something extraordinary. He doesn't need to do anything to be worthy of connection. He only needs to be. And this realization changes everything. Because the nervous system finally learns what safety feels like. not as absence of threat, but as acceptance of vulnerability. In this space, the divine masculine begins to soften in ways he never allowed himself before. His breathing slows, his body relaxes, his mind stops scanning for danger, and with that relaxation comes healing. Not dramatic healing, not cathartic release, but quiet repair. The repair of trust. Trust in himself. Trust in presence. Trust that intimacy does not automatically lead to loss. This is where the bedroom becomes a place of emotional regulation, where two nervous systems co-regulate without effort, where silence feels nourishing instead of awkward, where nothing happening feels like everything. For the divine masculine, this is revolutionary, because safety has never been associated with intimacy before. Safety lived in solitude, in independence, in emotional distance. But now, safety lives in closeness, and that rewires something fundamental. This is often when physical intimacy changes form. It becomes slower, more intentional, more attuned, not driven by desire alone but by listening. Listening to breath, listening to tension, listening to the body signals. Touch becomes communication. A hand resting on a chest says, "You're allowed to rest." A shared breath says, "You're not alone." And for the divine masculine, who has spent a lifetime carrying weight silently, this permission to rest is deeply emotional. Sometimes tears come. Not always. Sometimes it's just a deep exhale, a letting go he didn't know he was holding. This is the healing of the masculine wound. The wound that says, you must be strong at all times, you must not need comfort, you must carry everything alone. The twin flame bedroom doesn't challenge this wound aggressively. It dissolves it gently, through consistency, through presence, through safety without demand. And this is why the divine masculine begins to linger. Not because he wants more, but because he feels less burdened. The body associates this space with relief, with regulation, with wholeness. And slowly, the divine masculine learns something he was never taught. That intimacy is not something that takes from him. It gives back. It restores. It heals. This is also where shame begins to loosen its grip. Shame around vulnerability. Shame around emotional need. Shame around softness. Because shame cannot survive in safety. When vulnerability is met without judgment. When emotion is allowed without consequence. Shame fades. And in its place, self-compassion begins to grow. This doesn't mean the divine masculine suddenly becomes expressive or emotionally fluent. Healing is not transformation overnight. It's capacity building. The capacity to stay present a little longer, to feel a little deeper, to run a little less. And the bedroom becomes the training ground for this capacity. A place where the divine masculine practices being human instead of performing strength, being present instead of perfect, being open instead of armored. This is why many divine masculines describe a shift where intimacy feels different, but can't explain how. It's not less passionate. It's more real. Less about release. More about connection. Less about escape. More about grounding. And this grounding changes how he moves in the world. He becomes more aware of his emotional states. More sensitive to energy. More attuned to authenticity. Because the healing doesn't stay in the bedroom. It radiates outward. Into conversations. Into decisions. Into boundaries. The divine masculine begins to notice when he's disconnecting, and gently brings himself back. He becomes less reactive, more present, more willing to sit with discomfort instead of fleeing it. This is union in action. Not union with another person, but union within himself. Mind and body no longer at war. Strength and softness no longer opposing forces. Masculinity no longer defined by control, but by presence. And this is the true purpose of twin flame intimacy. Not obsession, not dependency, not drama, but healing. Healing the split created by survival. Healing the nervous system's belief that closeness equals danger. Healing the masculine heart that learned too early how to endure, but not how to rest. The bedroom becomes sacred not because of what happens there, but because of what stops happening. The performance stops. The armor drops. The running pauses. And in that pause, something ancient returns. A memory of safety. A memory of wholeness. a memory of being held by presence itself. In the next part, we'll explore a symbolic story that brings all of this together. A story of a man who didn't understand why one quiet moment of intimacy changed everything, until he realized it wasn't about the other person at all. It was about finally meeting himself. Because healing doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives softly and stays forever. He didn't expect anything to happen. That's what made it so unsettling. There was no dramatic build-up, no intense conversation, no promises or confessions. Just a quiet evening that felt ordinary on the surface. They were lying side by side, not touching much, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. Outside, the world continued as usual, cars passing, distant sounds of life moving forward. Inside the room, something else was happening. Something subtle, something irreversible. He remembers staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. It was slow, steady, unconcerned. And for the first time in a long time, his own breathing began to match it. Not consciously, instinctively. That's when he felt it. A strange softness in his chest. Not emotion as he knew it. Not excitement, not desire, not even happiness. It was relief. As if he had been holding his breath for years without realizing it, and only now remembered how to exhale. He didn't understand why. Nothing extraordinary was happening. No touching. No words, no expectations, and yet something inside him was loosening. He felt present in his body in a way that was unfamiliar. His shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched. His thoughts, usually racing, planning, analyzing, slowed to a quiet hum. Time seemed to stretch, or maybe it disappeared altogether. Later, he wouldn't be able to say how long they stayed like that. 10 minutes? An hour? It didn't matter. Because the moment didn't register as time. It registered as truth. And truth doesn't need duration. At some point, she shifted slightly, her hand resting gently on his chest. Not intentionally, not symbolically. Just naturally. And that's when it happened. A wave rose up from somewhere deep inside him. Not panic. Not desire. Grief. Sharp. Sudden. Unexpected. His throat tightened. His eyes burned. Memories surfaced without images. A sense of being alone as a child. A memory of needing comfort but not knowing how to ask. A feeling of being strong because there was no other choice. He didn't cry. He didn't move. He just stayed. And that was new. Normally, when something uncomfortable surfaced, he escaped. He distracted himself. He changed the subject. He left. But this time he stayed. Not because he decided to. Because he could. Because something about this moment, this quiet, unassuming closeness, felt safe enough to hold what had never been held before. Afterward, when he left, nothing felt the same. The streets looked familiar but distant. Conversations felt hollow. Noise felt louder than usual. And a question kept repeating in his mind. What just happened to me? He tried to rationalize it. Told himself it was emotional vulnerability. That it meant nothing beyond intimacy, that he was overthinking. But the feeling didn't leave. Over the next few days, strange things began happening. Music hit him differently. Certain songs brought tears without explanation. Silence felt heavy but also inviting. He found himself wanting to be alone, not out of avoidance but confusion, because being alone now felt different too. He noticed how tense he usually was, how guarded, how rarely he allowed himself to rest. And the realization unsettled him. Have I been living like this the whole time? He didn't reach out. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to explain what he was experiencing without sounding broken. So he did what he always did when things got complicated. He pulled back. Days passed. Then weeks. From the outside it looked like disinterest. But inside he was unraveling. He began questioning everything. His definition of strength. His idea of love. His belief that independence meant emotional distance. That one quiet moment in the bedroom had cracked something open. Not dramatically, but permanently. He started noticing patterns in his life. How he kept people at arm's length. How he avoided deep emotional reliance. How he equated need with weakness. And suddenly those strategies felt outdated. Protective, yes, but also lonely. One night, unable to sleep, he lay in bed replaying that moment. Not the physical closeness, the stillness, the absence of pressure, the feeling of being allowed to exist without performing. And that's when it hit him. That moment wasn't about her. It was about him. About the parts of himself he had never given permission to surface. The softness, the need for safety, the desire to be seen without having to prove anything. He realized something else too. He had mistaken love for intensity, and safety for boredom. But what he felt in that moment wasn't intensity. It was grounding. And grounding doesn't shock the system, calms it. This realization scared him, because it meant that what he had been chasing his entire life, success, control, independence, had not actually given him what he needed. And that meant change. Not small change, foundational change. Weeks later, when he finally reached out, it wasn't dramatic. No grand apology, no declarations, just presence, a willingness to sit, to be quiet, to listen. He wasn't healed, he wasn't transformed, but he was awake. Awake to the truth that intimacy was not the enemy, avoidance was. Awake to the fact that strength didn't mean carrying everything alone. It meant allowing support. And that one moment, that quiet, unremarkable moment in the bedroom, had done what nothing else in his life had managed to do. It showed him who he really was beneath the armor. Not a man who needed to run, but a man who had simply never felt safe enough to stay. In the next part, we'll turn the focus back to you. Because stories like this aren't rare. They're happening quietly everywhere. And the question is no longer why this awakening happens, but what you're being invited to notice within yourself. Because sometimes the most profound awakenings don't arrive with answers. They arrive with recognition. By now, something inside you may be stirring. Not because of the words themselves, but because of what they're pointing to. Stories don't move us unless they touch something we already carry. So instead of giving you conclusions, this part offers questions. Not questions to answer quickly. Not questions to explain away. But questions to sit with. Because awakening doesn't begin with answers. It begins with honest inquiry. Let's slow down. Take a breath. And see what resonates. Have you ever walked away from an intimate moment feeling more awake, but also more unsettled? Not because something went wrong, but because something felt too real to ignore. A moment where closeness didn't relax you. It opened you. And afterward, you didn't know what to do with what surfaced. Did you feel emotions you couldn't name? A sudden heaviness in the chest. A lump in the throat. A sense of longing that didn't belong to the present moment. So, what did you do with those feelings? Did you allow them? Or did you distract yourself? Did you move closer? Or did you pull away? And if you pulled away, was it truly because you didn't care? Or because caring felt overwhelming? Here's another question. Have you ever felt seen beyond your body? Not admired, not desired, seen. As if someone noticed your presence rather than your performance. As if you didn't have to be impressive, strong, or certain to be valued. And if that happened, did it feel comforting? Or did it make you uneasy? Because for many people, being truly seen is more frightening than being desired. Desire allows distance. Presence dissolves it. And dissolving distance requires vulnerability. What happens inside you when someone sits with you in silence? Not trying to fix. Not trying to change. Just present. Do you relax? Or does your mind search for something to do? Do you feel safe? Or exposed? And if exposure arises, what are you afraid might be revealed? This is not about judgment. It's about awareness. Because avoidance is not a flaw. It's a learned response. One that once kept you safe. Another question. What does intimacy mean to you? Is it closeness? Or is it intensity? Is it consistency? Or is it excitement? Is it safety? Or is it unpredictability? And where did you learn those definitions? From experience? From culture? From early attachment patterns? Or from what you needed to believe to survive? Because intimacy shaped by survival feels very different from intimacy shaped by presence. Survival intimacy demands control. Presence intimacy invites surrender. Which one feels more familiar to you? And which one feels more threatening? Have you noticed a pattern in your relationships? Moments of deep connection followed by distance. moments of closeness followed by withdrawal. So, what happens inside you at the peak of intimacy? Do you feel grounded? Or do you feel the urge to escape? And if escape arises, what are you escaping from? The other person? Or the parts of yourself that intimacy brings to the surface? Here's a gentler question. When was the last time you allowed yourself to rest in connection? Not perform, not explain, not anticipate loss. Just rest. And if that feels unfamiliar, why? What story did you learn about rest? About needing? About depending? And who taught you that story? Awakening often begins when we realize that our coping strategies are no longer serving us. Not because they were wrong, but because they belong to an earlier chapter. And the twin flame journey, whether you believe in the concept or not, simply accelerates this realization, because it mirrors us back to ourselves without filters. So here's a deeper question. What part of you is being called to heal? Not the version of you that functions well, not the version that is admired, but the version that learned to adapt quietly, the part that learned to be strong early, the part that learned not to ask, the part that learned to stay in control to avoid being hurt. What does that part need now? More distance? Or more compassion? More explanation? Or more presence? And are you willing to offer it? To yourself? Because awakening is not about finding someone else. It's about finding yourself within connection. One final question. If intimacy didn't require you to lose yourself, what would you allow? If closeness didn't threaten your independence, how would you show up? If vulnerability didn't mean weakness, what would you stop running from? Sit with that. You don't need to answer today. You don't need clarity right now. Awakening doesn't rush. It unfolds, one honest moment at a time. In the next and final part, we'll bring everything together. Not with conclusions, but with an invitation. Because this journey isn't about reaching a destination. It's about learning how to stay present when truth arrives. And truth once felt cannot be unfelt. The only question is, will you listen? If you've stayed with this journey until now, it's not because you were looking for answers. It's because something inside you recognized itself. Awakening rarely announces itself with certainty. It doesn't arrive as clarity. It arrives as recognition. A quiet inner knowing that says, this is about me. Not about chasing another person. Not about fixing a relationship. Not about forcing a reunion. But about remembering something you forgot while surviving. Because the divine masculine awakening does not begin with love. It begins with truth. The truth that strength without softness becomes isolation. The truth that control without presence becomes emptiness. The truth that independence without intimacy becomes disconnection. And the twin flame experience, especially in the most intimate spaces of life, does not exist to complete you. It exists to reveal you. What you've seen throughout these parts is not a mystery meant to confuse you. It's a pattern meant to wake you up. The timeless moments, the emotional waves, the urge to run, the body remembering before the mind understands, the bedroom transforming from performance into safety. These are not accidents. They are signs that an old operating system is shutting down, and something more authentic is trying to come online. Here is the truth most people miss. The divine masculine does not awaken by becoming more spiritual. He awakens by becoming more present. Presence with emotion. Presence with discomfort. Presence with truth. Because awakening is not about ascending out of the human experience. It's about finally entering it fully. For many divine masculines, the greatest fear is not intimacy. It is losing identity. The identity built on being needed but not needing. Being strong but not soft. Being capable but not vulnerable. And yet, what this journey reveals is something radical. You do not lose yourself in true intimacy. You recover yourself. The parts of you that were left behind when survival became more important than feeling. The parts of you that learned to shut down in order to keep going. The parts of you that confused numbness with stability. Awakening is not dramatic. It is subtle. It happens when you stop running, not towards someone else, but away from yourself. And here is the most important realization. Union does not happen between two people first. It happens within. When the mind and body stop fighting. When strength and sensitivity stop competing. When control loosens just enough for trust to form. This is why chasing union externally never works. Because the twin flame connection is not a destination. It is a mirror. And mirrors don't give you what you want. They show you what is. If you are watching this as the divine masculine, you are not broken. You are not late. You are not failing. You are learning how to stay present with a depth you were never taught how to hold. And that learning is brave. If you are watching this connected to a divine masculine, your worth is not measured by whether he stays or runs. His journey is not a reflection of your value. Awakening cannot be forced, can only be allowed. And allowance requires patience, boundaries, and self-respect. For everyone on this path, understand this. The twin flame journey does not ask you to suffer endlessly. It asks you to wake up honestly, to notice where you abandon yourself, to notice where you override your truth, to notice where you confuse intensity with intimacy, and then to choose differently, not dramatically, not perfectly, but consciously. Awakening is not a finish line. It is a way of being, a willingness to feel, a willingness to pause, a willingness to stay present when your instincts tell you to run. And here is the final message. The divine masculine awakens not when he becomes fearless, but when he realizes that fear does not need to control him. Not when he masters emotion, but when he stops avoiding it. Not when he finds the perfect partner, but when he becomes present with himself. This is not about romance. It is about integration. And integration changes everything. If this message resonated with you, if something inside you softened, stirred, or felt seen, that is your sign. You are already awakening. So here's the invitation. Not a demand, not a promise, an invitation. Stay. Stay with your feelings a little longer. Stay with presence a little deeper. Stay with truth even when it disrupts comfort. And if you feel called to continue this journey together, like this video so the message reaches those who need it. Subscribe if you want more deep explorations of the twin flame journey and divine masculine awakening. Comment below, not with conclusions but with honesty. And remember, you were never meant to chase love. You were meant to become available to it. Awakening is not something you achieve, something you allow. And once allowed, changes everything.